What would you do if living your dream meant that you were sick? Or if living your dream felt like it was slowly killing you? If the very thing that you've worked your whole life towards, your vocation, your passion, your professionalism, your practice, your music, your art, was draining your joy, your identity, or even your will to keep going. This is not a metaphor. This is the lived reality for thousands of Canadian music industry professionals. Behind the festivals and the grants and the music weeks and the parties and the album drops and the studio sessions and the sexy social media, there's a silent crisis going on. I spent the last year of my life listening, observing, and talking to feedback from artists, crew, tour managers, employees, artist managers, support workers, and fellow researchers. And what I noticed wasn't just burnout, it wasn't just stress. It's actually a system that fundamentally is unsustainable for human well-being. And yet, oops, they go back. Oh, yay, thank God. I love it when a clicker comes together for me. Despite this crisis, and as evidenced by this incredible week, music endures because it is fundamentally such a profoundly human thing that we all share. Around the world, mothers sing to their babies. We use music at weddings, funerals, protests, obviously, movies, soundtrack, commercial, road trips, vacuuming, whatever. We use music across cultures and generations to move and connect us. We have to shift the way we think of music not as a luxury, not just as background noise, but as a fundamental biological, emotional, and cultural thread of the very fabric of our lives. So before we talk about the people behind the music and the research, I'd like to invite you to just close your eyes for a moment, if you trust the people next to you. Close your eyes for a moment, 48 seconds to be exact, and let's just take a moment to remember how music makes us feel. You can turn it up a little bit. So nothing actually changed in this room, but everything changed in this room, right? I could see people kind of smiling, maybe thinking about things. Your body started moving before your brain even caught up to what was going on. You're like, what was that? That was Jaws. I couldn't swim in a swimming pool for years after that thing. Lyrics and music are fundamentally so profound. It pulls us back to times of joy and heartbreak and power, and sometimes all at once, and bypasses the tangible into the intangible. But here's what most of us don't think about, even those of us in the industry, and certainly people who experience those musical moments throughout their lives, is that somebody made that moment. Somebody's, human beings, wrote it, produced it, performed it, mixed it, managed it, booked it, toured it, promoted, funded the songs that just moved you. And most of those people, even here in Canada, are struggling to survive. Our culture's glorification of the tortured artist, coupled with the industry's cutthroat, short-lived success model, has led to widespread apathy about the mental health struggles in our music industry. Our Soundcheck survey set out to understand what's really going on beneath the surface of our industry here in Canada, across roles and identities and generations. Because although there's a lot of other great research around the world, Canada is a different country. We don't want to just take another country's data and extrapolate it and make some assumptions. We need to know our own story. And data tells that story. Data brings meaning and depth and breadth and context to the anecdotal conversations and stories that we all talk about at dinner parties and backstage and on tour buses and in the office and at sessions like this. The data that I'm going to share with you today is just data from the first 800 respondents, and the early results are actually quite sobering. Some of it's pretty difficult to talk about. But we also found a profound and fierce desire for change, a longing to connect, to communicate, to build community, and to put fully into this conversation the fact that we cannot have a thriving music culture if the people behind it are exhausted, unwell, and unseen. So, like I said, ce matin je présente en anglais, mais toutes les informations sont disponibles à revelios.com si vous voulez lire en français. Today's objective is twofold. One is to increase awareness, because we can't fix what we don't know about. The second thing is really hopefully to catalyze a sense of urgency, agency, and accountability about what we can and should be doing to support each other and the people around us for our daily experience of human beings showing up in whatever role we play in our Canadian music industry, so we can continue to nurture this vibrant Canadian scene and continue to drive these incredible programs and experiences like Capital Music Week, really, and support the Canadian vision of what that looks like. Okay, now I'm gonna go rogue. I just needed that for my intro. You can see slides on the back. You can see slides up here. Some of the slides are gonna have a whole bunch of data on them, so if you're like, I can't read that, just turn around and you can read some of the big stuff there. Okay, let's get into the survey itself. A couple of years ago, as I was completing my master's in psychology, my specialty is the biopsychosocial look at mental health, because mental health is not just above the neck, right? Mental health is impacted by our entire physiology, biology, social network, ecosystem, and certainly as adults, we spend a lot of time at work. So how we work and where we work and with whom we work actually impacts our mental health. As a musician for 35 years, the music industry, this sector, is of deep interest and concern to me. I thought I'm going to do some research on music industry mental health. There's a lot of incredible research out there around the world, but there was a notable gap in terms of Canadian data. There was one small study, thankfully done by the East Coast Music Association in 2018 with 50 people. But otherwise, we have not had any meaningful, national, broad look at the experiences of different folks working in our Canadian industry. So we set out to change that. This is not an academic presentation, so I'm not going to go into the real nuts and bolts of how we designed it and how we are analyzing these, but just the top line. The Soundcheck study is going to be a multi-year study, but the survey was phase 1, and really we're looking to gather as much feedback at scale as possible. We designed it so that we would get as much feedback, but also keep as high a completion rate as possible. Because as you know, and I don't know about you, but everybody's a little surveyed out. You put a survey out there, people are like, oh my God, like I really want to do this, but oh my God, I hope it's not that long. So we had to design it to a way where we could get as much feedback and information, but also ensure that people just didn't drop out. We talked to a lot of diverse stakeholders, communities, to ensure that the language that we used in the questions were inclusive and respectful. And as researchers, we put steps in place to ensure that we mitigated any of our own biases and we could ensure data integrity. We're using an analytic tool, a software tool that enables this survey to be 100% anonymous and confidential and secure. So nobody other than me sees the data, maybe one of my research assistants, and there is no way to know anyone's identity unless at the end of the survey you say, hey, I really want to be part of this moving forward, here is my email. That's the only way. We scrub the data so that it is in fact completely anonymous, confidential, and secure. The survey is available in both English and French, and it consists of multiple choice, it consists of some yes, no, it consists of select all that apply, and then there are some areas where you could just write freely. Hey, I have something more to say about this, and let me know. Let me tell you, people had things to say. So we actually have pages and pages and pages of firsthand experiences, sharing, recommendations, etc. And as I mentioned, respondents were invited to share their email address. We had part 1 and part 2. Very few mental health surveys in the music industry actually look at the music industry as a de facto workplace. We don't talk about whether there's health and safety measures in place, psychological health and safety measures in place. We don't talk about leadership practices. We don't talk about the precarity of sort of, employment and all the other multifaceted aspects of that. So we actually included that in part 2 of our survey. So again, the data I'm going to share with you is based on the first 3 months. We launched this in September of 2024. And as of December 20th, we had over 800 respondents. And I thought, this is going to be open for a full year, but we cannot wait a full year to start bringing some of these challenges into the light, because when we bring them into the light, we can actually start talking about them and hopefully making changes. Demographically, this is a super top line one. There's a lot of stuff on the slides if you need to look at the bigger one there at the back. Most respondents in that first quarter were white, heterosexual, gender normative. Although the survey was available in both English and French, 94% responded as primarily English speaking. And we didn't get a lot of uptake from the province of Quebec or other provinces with a large Francophone community like New Brunswick. More than half reported an annual income below $50,000 a year. 82% reported some level of university education, whether completed or not completed. 50% were between 26 and 45 years of age, and the other 50 were between 18 to 25 and then up to 75 years old. And we heard from people from various roles in our industry, but half of them identified their primary role as an artist or a performer. You can see here we have technical crew, we have salaried employees. They might have worked for a record label, they might have worked for Sony, they might have worked for a nonprofit organization, and then independent entrepreneurs, teachers, lawyers, etc. Here's some insights around that. As I mentioned, this study is one of the few in Canada, but also around the world, to actually invite participation from all roles so that we can look at the differences in mental health experiences depending on what role you play in the industry. As I mentioned, there was limited participation in the Francophone communities, which highlights an opportunity, quite frankly, of ensuring that it gets out there so we have more feedback. And we did not see a large representation from minoritized groups. And this likely signals very understandable issues of trust, apathy, feedback, fatigue, or insufficient targeted outreach. Many minoritized groups have been surveyed and surveyed and surveyed and focus grouped and surveyed, and they give lots of feedback and nothing changes. So we do know, and we expect actually, that when an online survey goes out, and sometimes it goes out from perhaps an employer, people are like, I don't believe this is anonymous. So what we're doing is, now that we're out actually talking about it, we're doing some media about this, people are starting to recognize, oh, it's Revelios, which is a separate company altogether. They're starting to actually increase their level of trust and comfort that it is in fact going to be respected as confidential. And all music genres were representative. Most of the respondents primarily identified with sort of the big ones. But we did have people who played in orchestras. We had people who did ska or did very specific subgenres of music. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of the mental health. 94% of all those respondents agree that mental health issues are widespread in our Canadian music industry. 86% say they personally experience mental health challenges, and almost everyone, 95%, have said, I have seen others struggling, and I actually think everyone has some suboptimal mental health. We also have infrastructural and systemic barriers in our music industry, ongoing stigma and lack of support when it comes to mental health, but also when it comes to a bunch of social identifiers and sort of socio-cultural, geopolitical discourse these days that contribute to some of those barriers and stigma. And the bottom line is that these individuals collectively said, we're all in a state of burnout, distress, and long-term harm. Like, we're all struggling a little bit. Interestingly, 68% said, although there's a lot of talk about mental health these days, and there's this belief and understanding, I think that part of it is probably true, that people are more willing to say, hey, I'm struggling with mental health. We see a lot of A-listers and stars, talking about that. There's actually still a very meaningful stigma when it comes to actually talking about mental health and seeking mental health support. And that is probably based on a lot of different factors. One just being the precarious nature of the work itself, which is still like, do I really want to put my hand up and be open and honest about my struggles? Because I gotta keep this gig, or I gotta work on this. And there's still a lack of real mental health literacy in our culture at large, but certainly in the workplace and in the music industry, that makes that seemingly a risky endeavor. This is a difficult slide to share. We can't have a mental health study without looking at mental health crisis. And certainly the end of the mental health crisis spectrum is suicide. And this questions around suicide ideation is of notable concern. When asked if they felt life wasn't worth living, 52% of the respondents said yes. 43 have considered taking their own life at one point. Just as a benchmark, the Canadian average for suicide ideation, general population, is around 11 to 12%. When we look at other music industry mental health research, so from around the world, it is certainly higher. It's usually in the 25 to 35%. So this is at the high end even of that range, even of our peers around the world. We asked people if they have ever been diagnosed with a mental health illness or disorder. Because this is a survey not just about diagnosis, but just of our actual mental health, just like our overall health, and that includes our mental health. 50% said, yes, I have actually been diagnosed and currently experience, and it might be treated for, might not be treated for, a mental health disorder or illness. 50% said, no, I actually don't have a de facto diagnosis. But regardless of that, 84% say, I experience anxiety very regularly. I'm constantly tired. 70% report persistent sadness and feelings of hopelessness. And these are actually subclinical symptoms of mental illness and suboptimal health. As I mentioned, one of the most impactful realities that leads to suboptimal mental health is financial stress. The music industry has always been a precarious vocation, and it continues to, and likely is worsening based on, as I mentioned earlier, some of the geopolitical challenges these days. But 80% say financial stress directly impacts their mental health, and only 6% say that they feel that they have a sense of job security. That includes, as I mentioned, people who have salaried jobs. That includes people who identify as entertainment lawyers and accountants and artist managers and people who work at labels and some of the big three. So yes, 54% were artists and performers, but this sort of feeling of precarity and I don't know if I'm gonna have any sort of stability is a challenge, and as you can imagine, in our current socioeconomic times, that leads to a lot of stress. As I mentioned, this is one of the few studies that actually looks at music industry as a workplace and therefore looks at certain work environments and leadership aspects. And only 10% say that leaders or persons in power, because we recognize that in many places in the music industry, we don't have a de facto reporting leader, but there's always somebody in charge. So we invited people to answer whether these people actually create a supportive work environment. 81% felt that their work environment was not conducive to good mental health, and 94% felt that the industry needs to do more to address these issues. I mentioned earlier that 68% say there's a stigma about even just putting your hand up and saying, I'm struggling with mental health issues and I need some support. Part of mental health conversation has to be our relationship with substances. And so we did ask questions around substance use and stigma. And interestingly, you're gonna get judged either way. So there's either a stigma about using too many substances, and that includes alcohol, cannabis, everything. And there's also a stigma if you have decided to change your relationship with substances and be in recovery or abstain or not be part of it. So as I said, it's a very judgy position. And this double-edged stigma, again, discourages open dialogue about just relationships with substances in general and ensuring that we all, regardless of our choices, have access to support. There's an opportunity for increased mental health literacy, and that includes substance use literacy in our music industry, because we often do work in places that are rife with substances. Like we're constantly working in periods of times of celebration, etc., and stress and touring and hustle culture, grind culture. So this is a big area of this is an opportunity for improved literacy and understanding, so that we can dial that judgment down a little bit. In Canada, there's a severe lack of mental health resources specific to the music industry. And I will say, compared to some other countries, actually, the US have some incredible programs and services available specific and tailored to the music industry professionals. Same with the UK, same with Australia, some in France. And there's a real opportunity here in Canada based on my involvement with the international community, but also based on the feedback from these first 800 people. So 96% agree that mental health education is critical, but 81% have said, I've never received any training, and in fact, I don't even know where to go to get it. 85% want better tools to manage their own mental health, and 95% want to learn how to better support their peers and their coworkers. So we need to, and this is one of the reasons why Revelios exists, is to actually start meeting these urgent needs for structured mental health resources, training, and leadership development, specifically catered to the music industry. It is a different life, it's a different kind of workplace, and we can't just, pull something cool from YouTube and go, great, let's do this here, without actually talking about some of the nuances. So one of the reasons, I mentioned earlier, my specialty is biopsychosocial. And we have to think about the fact that all of these people, all of us are humans, and we all as human beings share the same basic needs. From the minute we're born, we're all in it together. We are all born, we all go through life, and we all die. Like, you can't refute that, right? So right now, we're living in the messy middle. And in that messy middle, we all have basic biological, psychological, and social needs. They are all deeply interconnected and intersect. And working in the music industry has traditionally and currently made it very difficult in some cases to meet those basic human needs on a regular basis. So we ask people about some of these basic needs. 9% say, I get enough sleep, which leads to that earlier data around, I am just constantly and chronically exhausted. We think about our brains neurobiologically. When we are exhausted, we can't actually actually access the incredible cognitive, imaginative, problem-solving, executive functioning aspects. So we're just constantly living in a deficit. But we're also asked to do more with this deficit-ridden brain. So think about that, just from a sleep perspective. And every time I talk about this, people go, yeah, we're all exhausted. That also leads, of course, to using more substances, because when you're exhausted, you gotta take something, you gotta take it, et cetera, et cetera. So 9% get enough sleep. Interestingly, most respondents say, like 65% say, I actually feel like I get a pretty decent amount of exercise, and I actually feel like I have a pretty decent social. So that's pretty good, but certainly 35% still say, I'm actually not meeting those other social or biological needs. We also invited people to share what other chronic conditions they might be living with, because we know that when we are living with chronic physical conditions and we have to go to work, that also negatively impacts our mental health. So there were several self-reported opportunities. We talked about neurodiversity, we talked about arthritis, mobility issues. Certainly in the music industry, a lot of musculoskeletal challenges. These are widespread, and yet there's hardly any discussion about the multifaceted physical ailments that people experience and have to manage on the regular. I want to just point out this one thing about the fact that this survey is self-reported. This is not a randomized, double-blind clinical study. This is a survey that goes out and people can fill in based on their own experiences and hypotheses. And it's important to recognize that these data, therefore, are not, carved in stone, particularly when it comes to conditions like ADHD. And I'll call this out specifically only because currently there's an interesting conversation around the prevalence of self-diagnosing with social media, right? Everybody's seen a TikTok, you fill this out, oh, you got this thing, fill this out, you don't have this thing. So on the one hand, it's helpful to try to understand perhaps what I'm feeling, that I'm not alone. On the other hand, sometimes it is harmful because we draw conclusions when in fact we may just be a very healthy human being living in a very unhealthy, onslaught of just like ping, 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 which again, basic human needs, we need a little bit of distance between constant stimulus. Adult prevalence of ADHD in Canada is between 4 and 8%, so as you can see, this is significantly higher. I will say that individuals with neurodiverse experiences are often drawn to the creative industries. It's actually something so in the creative industries, we often will see prevalence in the 20s, which makes a lot of sense. But again, I think we just have to be thoughtful about the self-reported data saying 41%. I would caution with, don't post this anywhere is what my point is. But you can post it as long as you say self-reported, why does this matter, context. Okay, barriers to career sustainability. One thing I have found really interesting, so I've been a musician for 35 years, but I've only been in the music industry for about a year and a half. I've been working in lots of other areas, so I've been an active member of the music industry as a musician for many decades, but I haven't really been up close and personal with the industry. And I've been going to lots of conferences, I've been talking to lots of people, certainly as we've been doing this research. And what I hear is, it's never been easier. It's never been easier to be a breakout international star. You just gotta do it. You just gotta put it out there, you'll have millions of followers, you just gotta get a Canva account, and then you just gotta do this thing, then you just gotta do this thing, you gotta get a Stripe thing, then you gotta do this. It's never been easier. If you're not successful, it's probably your problem, your fault. This is what I hear. From people sitting on podiums all the time, you know what? Just follow these 10 steps, you'll be famous. You'll be raking in the dough. And I think that also contributes to suboptimal mental health, because it's basically saying, well, I don't know how to do all that. And I think we have to be really honest with ourselves and start amplifying this conversation, because 84% of these people say it's difficult for Canadian musicians to break into international markets, whether they are actually a musician or they're actually an artist manager or label, whatever. Only 3% strongly agree that Canadian radio effectively represents homegrown musicians, limiting opportunities for local talent. And only 19%, this is from a study that was done in 2020, only 19% agree that creating online content is easy, which is what everybody tells you to do. Just go make this thing and be a star, Justin Bieber, come on. Because what makes you great at your job doesn't necessarily translate into making you great at being a digital content creator, marketing engagement, software acquisition management, like, come on. So even some of these narratives contribute to this onslaught of overwhelm and stress and just feeling like, shit, it's probably me. We also have to think about the geopolitical realities. The bottom line is, in Canada, we live next to the big monster. That's the big market, right? And many people in the music industry know that in order to have a sustainable living, you have to go and tour in the States. You have to break into those markets. And in the past 18 months, it's become increasingly difficult. Even in the Biden era, the P2 visas became harder to get, longer to procure, more expensive, and now it is terrible. You can't get them. They are prohibitively expensive, and even if you have them, there are people being detained, there are people being questioned, there are people being turned back. So that is a real thing, so we have to be very thoughtful about how that actually is a barrier to career sustainability and negatively impacts our mental health. The streaming, the reality is, the digital streaming revenue generation model makes it very difficult for creators to get paid, and the people who support those creators to get paid. And I added back catalogs to this just the other day because I was listening to an interesting article about, I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of sync licensing is now all like back catalog stuff. Because the people who own those back catalogs are like, I gotta make some money, right? They have commoditized these things. So now, even for sync licensing, or for TV commercials, or for whatever, you're hearing the Rolling Stones and Bruce Springsteen and et cetera, and not actually new emerging artists. All of these things have to be seen in the light starkly so that we can recognize that this impacts our ability to actually have an adult vocation where we can earn a livable wage. And it impacts our mental health. Okay. The music industry traditionally and globally has been an exploitive one. This is not news. In Canada, again, my experience in talking to people and observing has been, I don't think it's as bad here though, because we're Canadian. It's not so. Our early reports suggest that sexism, racism, bullying and harassment are widespread, with gender and racial minorities disproportionately affected. When I share these data with lots of people, they go, yeah, that makes sense. Women, non-binary individuals, and racialized groups report the highest level of workplace discrimination with the lowest response rate. And what that means is, when it happens, even if there is a de facto mechanism in that workplace for you to go to get remedial help, it doesn't work. You're kind of told like, oh, boys will be boys, or like, don't take it so personally, whatever. This is not good. And we need to actually, I think at the community level, start to band together to at least bring this into the light so that we can start holding peoples in power and organizations accountable for not just having policies, but of doing the policies. Having values on a poster or having policies in an HR department is not the same as doing the things on a daily experience for the human beings in your place of work. Now, one of the most important aspects of collecting feedback from human beings in an anonymous, confidential way is, I believe, is to share some of their feedback directly with you. This is fully anonymized, but I want to just give you a smattering of some of the open text that I see. So just take a moment and read some of these. have pages and pages and pages and pages of individual feedback, of experiences in the past year, in the past 40 years, from all individuals. And I think it's important that everyone who took the time to give us feedback, regardless of their political sense or their feelings of frustration, deserves a voice, deserves to be heard. But we need to start creating mechanisms by which we can come together and talk to each other so that we can find ways to come together instead of to continue to drive us further apart. But this is just a smattering of unedited commentary from some of these early respondents. As I mentioned earlier, in addition to this rapid ongoing change in our modern music industry is really tough to manage. Just being an adult human these days, there's a lot going on, but in this industry, it is rapidly changing, it is precarious, it's like the rules change every 5 seconds, the streaming things change every 5 seconds, you're not sure what to do. In this industry, I work cross-sector, I worked in the healthcare sectors for many decades in leadership roles, and I continue to serve human-centered leadership development, psychological safety in different sectors. I've noticed that in the music industry, even in organizations, there's actually a very low level of leadership development, learning and development, and structural support for people to know, how do I drive high performance while ensuring that we have psychological health and safety? So that is an area of opportunity throughout the music industry. And 81% have said, if I work within an actual workplace, they perceive their work environment to be detrimental to their mental health. And some basic stuff like micromanagement, poor communication skills, ambiguity, like I don't even know what my job is, but then I'm told I'm doing a bad job. Like, constant do more with less, and an us versus them mindset. Here's some early macro insights, just some super big takeaways. That if I cut the data, because again, what we've often talked about is mental health in the music industry, and we just talk about artists and creators. We have to look at all of the humans that surround it. Interestingly, when we cut those data, the artist and the crew data and the employee data are actually pretty similar. As you just saw, the open feedback adds a lot of context and heft and gravity to the numbers themselves. And when we compare and contrast these data to other music industry, it's similar or worse, which I think is surprising to Canadian folks. To the Canadian general population, it's much worse. As I mentioned, the suicide ideation rate, 11 to 12 versus 50%. And other industries and sectors, the arts and entertainment industry is one of the worst industries when it comes to being able to optimize health in general and mental health in particular. So the data points to 3 primary areas driving this suboptimal health. One is ongoing worsening precarity of the work. It's hard to get the work, it's hard to keep the work, it's hard to get paid a living wage for the work. Number 2 is the suboptimal work environment, which we've just spoken about at length. It's tough to meet our basic human needs. There's a leadership gap. There remain very present social biases. These are all the isms: sexism, racism, bullying, ageism, ableism, and then just the ongoing, rapidly changing industry environment, tough to navigate. And lastly, we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough music industry tailored education, mental health literacy, leadership development, psychological safety, peer support communities. That's something that's also quite different in Canada compared to other countries when it comes to music industry, is there's a lot of robust peer support mechanisms. That's another thing that we're hoping to bring forward. And access to high quality counseling and coaching with people who actually get what it's like to work in this industry. So there's 3 things I believe strongly need to exist if we're looking to drive any meaningful change: awareness, agency, and accountability. As I said earlier, one of the objectives of today is to increase awareness. One of the objectives of this whole study actually is to increase awareness, which is what is happening. How can we look at something practically, honestly, without opinion, and just see what is happening and how do we know? But the second is agency. Can we say, you know what? let's start identifying what we can do, what is within our control. And lastly is accountability, which is if we identify what we can do, we then have to step into action and identify what we will do, individually, collectively, and then infrastructurally. So the goals here are, in the awareness category, is to normalize conversation around mental health in general, mental health in the music industry, increase education, and increase the visibility of mental health in our music industry in Canada. Agency is to equip individuals and community members with tools and support to take action for their own mental health, to learn how to set healthy boundaries, to learn how to stand up for meeting some of those biological needs, to ensure that we can connect and communicate so that we're not dealing with these challenges alone. And lastly, accountability, to help build structures and leadership that uphold mental health as a shared responsibility. So persons in power, whether they be in organizations, for-profit, non-profit, government, federal, municipal, provincial, when you come to conferences like these and you meet people, start talking about this stuff so we can start thinking about what specifically could we do. It might be as simple as putting up a poster in a green room. It might be as simple as saying, I'm gonna have a dinner party with my people and talk about just some of these top line data points that we talk about and what can we do and what support do we need? What help do we need from someone like Catherine Revelios? As Melanie mentioned, this survey remains open until the end of September of this year. If you are a member of the music industry, I think you probably all are if you're sitting here. If you haven't yet participated, please feel free to do so. The more voices, the more perspectives, the better our data. I don't have a list of recommendations at this point because we want to wait until that final study has closed to put out a more formal and academic report with all the recommendations. But we do have, and will be putting out over the next several months, little sort of tips about what small things we can start doing individually and collectively to improve our mental health. I want a big shout out to my research team. I also want to thank Unison and SOCAN. They partnered with us last September. They helped to launch it, send it out to all of their community. They're obviously very well-known organizations in Canada. I want a massive gratitude to them for helping us launch this and to continue to actually share some of these data. And obviously, our sincere thanks to everyone who took the time to fill out the survey, to give us their feedback, to give us their recommendations, to share their personal stories, because without them, we don't have those stories. Without them, we don't have this data. And without this data, we cannot shed light on this current mental health crisis. So here are the next steps. That QR code goes directly to our website where you can either take the survey or you can download the preliminary report that has all this data. You can download a 2-page infographic, English and Alpha. We have copies here as well that Karen and Sarita, you can get if you want to just take something home with you today. So if you're in the music industry and you haven't done it, please do it. Share these preliminary findings with everybody you know, and people in your community, the people that you work with, government officials, your boss, your sister, whatever. And please raise awareness. We will be posting a lot of these data on our social media, Revelios Mental Health, over the next several months and months and months and months. So please, if you want to, follow us, repost it, animate it, share some of your own stories, hold people accountable. And also, get interested in improving your own mental health literacy and gathering tools to build your own mental health toolkit so that we can actually start driving some meaningful and measurable change in our Canadian music industry.